I'm excited to welcome you to this month's first of two parts of Foundation for the Future's Conversations for the Future. My name is Meredith Garfalo. I'm definitely a familiar face. You've seen me on here before. I love hosting and moderating this. I've been a guest speaker, gosh, I believe now for at least a year, and so excited to be part of this group. So I am an award-winning broadcast journalist and meteorologist, but my passion is within the space community. And over the last several years, I have really jumped in and started taking space and science and storytelling and really working it into the mainstream media. And right now I'm doing some freelance work for media, but I'm also very involved in the space community. And I'm very excited about helping bridge the gap between what we are doing, not just here on Earth, but up in space, and getting everybody excited about our next generation of where we're going with space everything, which is why this is such an important conversation to be a part of. And this week we've got some great guests. And so we also have some little stuff throughout this next couple of hours that you'll be able to ask questions. And if you are not familiar with this, we are also going to be putting this on LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live. So don't worry, if your face isn't on there, you're fine. You can just hide your profile. But let's get this thing started. I'm so excited to introduce our first speaker, and that is Dan Geraci. I hope I said that right. I should have checked before. But Dan is currently the president and chief operating officer of Freefall Aerospace, a developer of communications infrastructure, and it's based in Tucson, Arizona. Now, prior to Freefall, Dan was president of Voyager Space Services, which is a provider of business operating services to emerging space companies, is also familiar with it, a unit of Voyager Space. Dan is also the chairman of the board of directors of the Planetary Society, which is the world's largest space advocacy group promoting the robotic and human exploration of space. You can still join that. Cool group to be a part of. And that was founded by Carl Sagan, Bruce Murray, and Lou Friedman. And Bill Nye, the science guy. Watched him growing up. Pretty cool. He's the current CEO and was elected to the board in 2003 and has been the chairman since 2006. So he has more than 35 years of experience as a senior executive in the investment and asset management industries. His prior roles include managing partner and co-founder of Cygenus Investment Partners, president and CEO of Phoenix Investment Partners, president and CEO of Pioneer Investment Management USA, president of Fidelity Investments Private Wealth Management Group, and other executive positions at Fidelity, Midland, Wylam Capital, and E.F. Hutton. Over the years, Dan has served on a number of boards and nonprofits in Boston, New York City, Toronto, and Connecticut. He's a member of the board of Foundation for the Future, focused on space policy and workspace development for the space economy. He's a past board member of Junior Achievement and a supporter of Best Buddies International. He currently lives in Seabrook, Texas, and he works in Tucson, Arizona. So everybody, let's join and welcome Dan. Dan, we're so glad to have you here and talk about something that everybody loves about, money, but also talking about something that we all love to talk about, which is space.
For sure. And thank you so much, Meredith. It's great to be here again. I thought, we're talking about finances, and this is something that several of us talk about quite often. And I think what's interesting, it's really the state of investment in the new space economy, if you will, that is what I wanted to focus on. We're at an interesting point right now. If you go back a year, if you go back 5 years, it's been a dramatic shift. And the most important thing is, and it's something I did several months ago, but I took an old chart of the rise of the tech industry, the tech boom in the mid 90s, all the way through into the early 2000s. And you could see critical points in there where certain companies emerged at the beginning, and then today they're just trivia questions. It's the same thing when you put space over it. And the thing that I want to stress is that we're in what I would refer to as kind of the first wave of maturation of this new space economy, where we've had some scar tissue built up around certain companies and around the industry as a whole. And the mindset of investors has shifted. In the beginning, like with any emerging, exciting, cool industry segment, which space is all of those things, there's just a kind of a frenzy of getting your hands on any company you can, writing checks to lots of young companies because you have no idea who's going to succeed. But there are so many with such great stories, with such great presentations, that you want to make sure that you get put your chip on every number you can. And that was very much the case. And I can think of numerous large investors or just individuals who've kind of made it a hobby who have written lots of little checks to a lot of little companies. Some of those have worked out incredibly well. Some of those will never be heard from again. And then we have some failures, which more recently has brought about this shift where people sit back and say, gee, I never thought that company would be out of business. I never thought that bank would go under and nearly create an extinction event for a number of space companies, as was the case with Silicon Valley Bank, and that ripple effect that's happened throughout the industry. And so now, as I sit here as a president of an emerging young space-related company, I'm seeing a difference in how investors are thinking. We all know the capital has gotten a little bit shy, that it's dried up a little bit. We also know there's still a lot of dry powder on the sidelines, but it's much more fussy about who it's going to talk to and who it's going to write a check to. And so it's harder and harder to find capital unless you have very substantial, more mature technology. The definition of that, well, having SBIRs and STTRs and other forms of grants is helpful because it at least says someone else has done a little bit of due diligence on the companies. But at the same time, SBIRs, as we know, unfortunately, is not the sign of what is going to be a successful company, only because those companies continue to fail at an alarming rate 1 or 2 years after they get their SBIRs. And it sustains them, and it can be a good mask for the fact that they are still not well enough established, that they haven't raised private capital. And so investors are more careful today. They have a memory from 25 years ago, but they more importantly are much more suspect when you look at certain sectors like launch, which we've talked about ad nauseum, where there's, I don't know, I think we're still at around 160 launch companies, possibly more. We know that's not sustainable. And so picking who is going to emerge becomes a challenge. And this is going to be the case for every segment of the new space economy. And so finding capital is going to be more challenging. If you have a contract, that puts you well above the crowd. If you have maybe a level 2 or other forms of grants, okay, you've got some sustainability. But at the end of the day, if your technology is not unique, if you don't have great differentiation going for you, if you're not the darling of DoD in some way, shape, or form, if you're not a partner of a major player who wants to use your technology and is giving you non-dilutive money to develop it, which is really important, then it's hard to be heard in that crowd. And I think that as we go forward now over the next couple of years, this maturation is going to continue. More companies will rise up, several will fall below. Again, back to the launch industry, seeing certain companies get launch facility assignment at Kennedy, the way that Phantom and Viaspace did from the government. Okay, that separates them from the pack. 2 years ago, they were part of the pack. Now they've emerged. We always knew that, yeah, they had promise. Now the votes are being cast with specific work, with money, with accessibility, with facilities, with launch access. And so This separation is going to continue to happen. Will there be consolidation? Of course. Will there be a lot of acquisitions? Maybe. If you're a larger company and you're looking to acquire somebody, or you want to be acquired because you're not doing as well as you might have thought, unless you have something of value to add to that acquirer's business, there's no real reason to consolidate. It's going to be more by way of the failure of a lot of companies and going out of business, and those good people being snatched up by someone else, as we saw in the wake of Virgin, with a lot of people being recruited very aggressively, literally hours later, online and everywhere else. So I would look for, survival of the fittest is going to be the rule. And capital is going to be reserved for only those who have the wherewithal to prove, or at least convince investors, that there's a very bright future. I think in terms of going public for a lot of companies, it's going to be a challenge. I personally, having spent most of my breathing life in that industry, going public is not the best solution for the vast majority of companies in any industry. Yes, we have a capital intensive industry, and it's true that it's a great place to get access to capital. But I think that there's going to be enough capital in other areas, in private areas, for most companies to succeed. If you're fortunate enough to get government contracts, which is one of the drivers that makes the new space economy much more resilient than tech 25 years ago, it's because there is a permanent 24/7, 365 customer who is immune to market winds and forces, and that's the U.S. government, specifically the Department of Defense. They are always there buying. Space Force is trying to buy every piece of technology it can get its hands on. That wasn't the case with high tech, so it was going to get whipped by the market forces 25 years ago. But the sustainability of this economy is going to be due in large part, especially early, to the appetite of the government, which means going public doesn't become the necessity that some people might. And many of us have talked, and Tim and Arena, this is a big issue. Is the government trying to dampen the private capital markets with some of the talk that's going on about policy with regard to companies being required to go public? This is not something that's good for the new space economy. It's not good for the entire economy. And so going public is something that most companies, if they can avoid it, should, especially if you're young. We saw what happened to SPACs, and that was good old fashioned greed that drove that part of the market. That's all it was. Something that drives, investors and investments very heavily. Somebody made money, but look at the result. Are those companies better off? And yes, there are some very good companies that went via SPAC, and that was because the companies themselves were solid. The fundamentals were solid. The technology was solid. Intuitive Machines is a great example of a really successful company coming up that used a SPAC. But at the end of the day, when you go public, you're living on a 90-day reporting cycle now. You are no longer able to run your company like a private company and make decisions for the long term that your handful of investors will understand. Now you have an earnings report to do every 90 days. You have to do an earnings call. You have analysts who don't understand the new space economy yet. This is not aerospace. This is not high tech. This is a unique segment. And the ability to do due diligence and analysis is also unique, and there's just not a lot of it right now. So at the end of the day, I'm hoping that more companies will stay private than go public. I'm assuming that they will. I think SpaceX has shown people, even if the reasons and rationale are different, then you can stay private for quite a long time. Maybe they spin Starlink public. That's my personal view. But I think that companies coming up need to focus on just getting the technology right and getting smart investors who understand the technology, who understand that space is a 10 to 15-year investment, not a 3-year investment the way a traditional VC would see it. And so the VCs have to be, this is a market for patient capital. That's the best way I can put it. But anyway, I'll stop and take questions if there are any. This is something we can go on about for days.
All right, it sounds like we have a question coming in from Anara. She wants to know, how can we convince larger companies across various industries to take on space strategy for a percentage of their operations? Are there ways to be more capital allocated for space from the established industries such as oil, mining, and energy?
That's a great question, because there have been numerous reports that have come out from every big consulting firm, and Harvard Business School weighed in saying that hey, every company's going to need to have a space strategy in the next 10 years. Everybody's going to have to figure out what that means. And a lot of people say, well, what does that have to do with this industry or that industry? But if we believe that we are finally now on the verge of building an economy in orbit, whether it's LEO or MEO or GEO, depending on where somebody wants to park, or if we're going to have the true cislunar economy and we're going to have things happening on the moon or Mars or the asteroids, then there isn't a business that isn't touched by that. And so if you're Caterpillar, then you're working on the heavy equipment and training the operators that are going to be the ones. It's not going to be some newfangled space heavy equipment company that's going to be doing work on the moon or Mars. It's going to be Caterpillar. It's going to be companies like that. It's going to be the big mining companies that are going to lead the charge on asteroid mining or mining from regolith on the moon or Mars. And food production. We've seen a lot of food production issues, and pharma, who can do a better job of making drugs in low gravity, and so companies will start to figure it out when it becomes a bigger topic. You need one company to pursue it, and then suddenly the competitive forces light up, and everybody says, "Uh-oh, we better do that." We better have an answer for that. And it's going to come down to the boards of directors who are really going to start driving this by demanding that there be a solution. You talk about oil and gas. There's such a transfer of technology and skills, around Houston, where I am, down by the Johnson Space Center. There's a lot of former NASA technicians who lost their jobs that are being retrained. To do other things inside the space industry. Oil and gas people who have shifted, who are great technicians, to the space industry. So it's going to happen, but some are going to lead, and there will be far more that follow, unfortunately.
And that's a really good point too, for people that might be watching outside of the space community, or there's always that question of, well, but I've been doing oil and gas, or I've been doing this type of finance my whole life, but this is a new thing. This is a new revolution. And now is the time where if you have that interest, or you're looking to take your career in a different direction, start the contacts now. Start reaching out to people such as yourself and find out where you could make that transition.
You can take a lesson, whether you prefer to or not, from the Saudis, who have decided that they're going to be the leaders in resource development off planet. Their big interest and focused on space is to develop resources, whether it's mining or on, the moon or Mars. They're putting a lot of money into researching this and having facilities and looking at buying stations and things like this, where they could take their skill set or their, what they've developed a reputation and a capability set around off the planet. And I think you're going to see this because the amount of labor that's going to be willing to go off planet. There are 140 some odd space agencies on this planet right now. And if you took a poll, people would think there were 6. Okay. And there's supposed to be another 20 or something coming on this year. And when you look at that, there's a reason, because they now have an ability to have a space economy. And this gets to Anara's question. It's going to come from the national, will level up, and it's going to drag everybody with it. People can be involved in the space economy. Countries can be involved. They can do something that where they were unable to do it before. And this is why it's going to be a truly global initiative. It's going to be because these countries, it's always been the rite of passage to be somehow involved in space for a country. And suddenly there's going to be 200 countries that are going to be able to play some role, whatever that role is, even if it's, hey, I'm a small island nation, but I can put a spaceport here and you can launch from my island. It's going to be things like that.
Absolutely. Don't forget, everyone that's watching, if you have any questions, to put them in the chat below. We would love to hear you get involved in the conversation. And another thing too, I think it'll streamline from that, Dan, is, you got to do your research as well. Because while there are all of these established space companies and people that are doing it the right way, there's also people that are saying this is an opportunity to go under the table and find ways to get money and to take your money. And if you don't know what you're investing in or you're getting involved in, you could find yourself in trouble really fast.
I'm looking at some of these questions that are popping up, and you're making a good point, I think, Meredith, that, due diligence is the most important thing. Do people really know how to assess a company? And you can do financial due diligence. That's the easier part, believe it or not. It's the technological due diligence that requires a lot of work. And there's a couple of great companies, one of them, Summit Space Corporation, Carl Baker's company, that really does really deep due diligence on technologies, especially around space. In terms of what the most enticing part of space infrastructure is, that would get investors involved, I think the general answer when it comes to investors is, there's an old rule from the great money manager Peter Lynch, who said, invest in what you know. And so if there are topics, areas that people feel like they're comfortable with, or that they just get it. Oh yeah, I'm sure, making drugs in space. Gee, that makes sense. You can make a better molecule, they say. Okay, that's great. Food. Gee, the ability to grow food in harsh environments. Well, that's happening right now in the Middle East with a number of initiatives. You look at Orbit Fab and their brilliant marketing at the very beginning, gas stations in space. I mean, people get that in a nanosecond. Okay, yeah, you have to refuel things. Those are the types of things that will get more of the individual investor involved. Then you move up to family offices, which is where I think, by the way, is the sweet spot for most new space companies to find capital, because they have the same investment time horizon that you need, which is a 10 to 15 year perspective. It's going to be technology that's differentiated, that'll solve basic problems: propulsion, transportation, facilities, manufacturing. Cislunar Industries is a great one, with their ability to help this kind of, to simplify it, the recycling in orbit of a lot of the debris and other material that we need to get rid of without just burning it up on reentry. So it's going to be things like that. I think international collaboration, to get to Giuseppe's question, data is going to be probably one of the biggest industries, period, bar none, for the space economy. And that's why we're doing what we're doing here at Freefall and a lot of others. That data is there. It's got to come down, so the ground station industry, as well as just the processing and orbital processing facilities, which I think is going to be a solution for the lack of downlink capacity we're going to have. But international, it's what I was getting to a minute ago. All of these countries have a role to play. Europe's aggressive, and within Europe, Italy especially is aggressive. Germany, and of course the UK. But I think that we're on the verge of seeing far more collaboration because this is the one industry where collaboration is almost a requirement. It's not simply a necessity, it's a requirement because no one can do space alone. And that's the reality. Nobody can do it alone.
Space alone. What a great line to leave you with from Dan. Thank you so much from Freefall Aerospace. We're glad to have you on today.
My pleasure.
Maybe your contact information in the chat room, so that way if anyone wants to email you, your LinkedIn profile, social media, so we can all connect. That was just great. Great way to kick this off and segue into our next guest, which is Steve Wolf. I'm so excited to welcome him to this week's Conversations for the Future. So Steve Wolf is a president and co-founder of Beyond Earth Institute. It's a policy think tank dedicated to an independent, nonpartisan approach addressing the pragmatic public policy implications of living and working. He is also for Global Spaceport Alliance and also a partner at CWSP International. He serves as the space and board editors for the Journal of Space Philosophy. Steve served in Washington as the executive director of the Congressional Space Caucus and also drafted the Space Settlement Act of 1988. The bill was signed the NASA Authorization Bill. Steve is the author also of The Obligation, A Journey to Discover Human Purpose and in the Cosmos. Steve, we're so happy to have you today and to have you start an exciting conversation.
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Meredith. I hope everyone can see me okay, and I hope you can hear me all right. Everything looks good. Okay. Well, yeah. Again, very happy to be here. I realized I was here about a year ago talking about this very same topic on the idea of focusing on financing of very large infrastructure elements as well as human habitation. We recognize that that there's a great deal of investment has been going into the space sector, but those amounts have been relatively modest compared to the amount of money that is going to be required for us to really develop the cislunar economy in particular. I mean, LEO itself is going to be hard enough as we transition from the ISS to commercial space stations. But let me share some slides and we'll get right into it. Again, really glad to be here, and thanks Tim Chrisman for doing this. I really appreciate everything that he's been doing. So I'm going to share my deck now. See if we can get this into yeah, there we go. Yeah, as Meredith mentioned, I'm with the Beyond Earth Institute. We've been operating for about 3 years now. We were established with a mission to establish and sustain a policy and legal framework that enables economically vibrant communities beyond Earth. It's quite a tall order, but we're trying to find those wedge issues in the near term that can help to that will help to over time expand out and enable this a space migration future. We are focusing on a range of topics. I'll let you scan through these in the interest of time, although, ranging from looking at property rights in space, enabling technologies, setting up norms of behavior, and so forth. But the last bullet is on financing mechanisms. We recognize, as I said, that we're going to need a level of creativity if we're going to be able to finance these very large habitats. And I'll get a little bit more into that. Beyond Earth, we're very active with our webinar series. I just wanted to, just a couple of minutes here. We have a webinar coming up where we're going to be looking at the human, apologize for that, for human safety, human space flight safety. We know that the learning period is coming, the moratorium is coming up for debate, and this is going to be a wonky conversation, but for those of you familiar with that, we'll get in deep with some real experts on the topic on the 24th. Hope you can join us for that. Then I also just would like to announce the Beyond Earth Symposium has a date and a location. Will be at the American University on November 1st and 2nd. This is our second annual symposium, so you guys could look for information on this and hope you can join us. Very related to what we're talking about today is the Beyond Earth's Leadership Council that we've stood up. This is really our main method by which we're engaging with the stakeholder community, and a key element of this council is a series of working groups that we're standing up. And so just specifically to this topic, we have an advanced financing working group. Currently has these individuals that are participating in that, and you may recognize Andy Aldrin of Embry-Riddle Aeronautics University, and of course Fort Davidson. Some folks that are really instrumental in helping to advance this conversation. If anyone's interested in being part of this, being part of what we're doing at the Beyond Earth Institute, we definitely encourage you to reach out to me. Today we're going to be talking about an ongoing study. It's not something that is, this is an ongoing process whereby the Beyond Earth is looking at advanced financing models. We put out a paper last fall. This is sort of the cover of Advanced Financing Models for Large-Scale Space Infrastructure and Habitats. And this is really, I'll be referencing information contained in this report largely for the rest of the presentation, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A. Let's see. But let's level set a little bit. Where are we now? I mean, how are we currently financing commercial space development? Many of us, most of us are familiar with the equity investment that's been going on in the space sector over the last decade. Has been quite exciting up through 2021. And then I think the economic downturn definitely has dampened the appetite for investment in the space sector. But I like to think of this as akin to the ebb and flow of the internet market, say during the dot-com bubble era, during the turn of the century, 2001, where the space economy is not going away, right? So the investments might be slowed down, but the assets, the capability, the potential is all still very much intact. So we should anticipate that this numbers, as we creep through the rest of the quarters of 2023, we want to see these numbers go up. And so I'm very bullish about this, about the potential for investment. However, that said, when we talk about $2 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion, those are good numbers, but there's also, again, it gets back to this point of, that investment is covering unmanned satellite applications. A little bit sliver maybe is going to manned spaceflight, but we want to see that significantly increase over time. The other way that space is being funded, of course, is through NASA, the NASA budget. It's at a reasonably healthy level these days. This particular chart is adjusted for inflation. We're not quite at the heyday of the Apollo era, but $25 billion investment a year is a pretty good chunk of money. Of course, a lot of that's going for basic research. Certainly a lot of it's going for manned exploration as we gear up for Artemis and we look ahead to potentially Mars. But much of this financing is going directly from NASA to the contractors to fulfill the various missions of the organization. What I want to hold on, I'm getting. But what's been interesting in the last 10 years, of course, is that NASA has been looking to leverage the private sector in what it's doing. and able to so that it could achieve its ends. And in 2006, NASA initiated the COTS program. Those of you on the line who are aware of this development has really brought home. I know the COTS program transformed into another name, but essentially it was the idea through this initiative. NASA spent for just $800 million. They got 2 new space launch vehicles and 2 automated cargo spacecraft. So it was a great way to leverage the private sector with federal dollars, and NASA, as it goes forward, is looking to continue to leverage that potential, right, through the CLPS program, the Unmanned Lunar Lander, the Viper, which is their lunar vehicle program. I understand now they don't want to use the term rover anymore, right? So we want to say it's a lunar vehicle. We're trying to get to a point where space is just an extension of everything we do here on Earth, right? So I thought that was interesting. And of course, the Lunar Lander program for Artemis is leveraging the commercial partnership. Very interesting. The Commercial LEO Destination program that was announced over a couple of years ago, is really, this is the program that is whereby the ISS, which is going to be decommissioned by the end of the decade, is going to be transferred over. All that activity is going to be transferred over to private operators of commercial space stations. This is an exciting prospect. But as if to those of you who get Space News magazine, I have an op-ed coming out in this upcoming issue, whereby I argue that the CLD program, the Commercial LEO Destination program, cannot fail. It is so critical that this particular program, which is being supported by NASA, but NASA is requiring that the private sector put up their own money for this, which is fine. That's absolutely the case. But we don't want to get into a situation where all of a sudden the NASA dollars run out before the private dollars can kind of come in and create a stable LEO economy based upon these private habitats. And so there's a gauntlet that these organizations are going to face, and that's where the tricky bit comes in when you're talking about the public-private partnership activities with NASA. So back to our financing research project. So overall, what basically we're trying to do like a review of all the historical ways of financing and what are those models. We also want to review and evaluate select proposed models for financing of large-scale infrastructure. So let's go. Let me walk you through that. I'm not sure how much time. I'm going to try to go through this pretty quickly at a very high level, but so we can have some time for discussion. I should say a full disclaimer here is I don't have a finance background myself, so I come from the policy side of this. So I'm heavily dependent upon the experts in the finance field. So as the president of the Beyond Earth Institute, this is an issue I know that we have to tackle, but it's going to require so what I'm reporting on is the work of the experts that have helped put this together. But first, what is meant by large-scale infrastructure and habitats in space? Some of the projects, it's not entire. This is not exclusive by any means, but this list. But certainly, advanced communication satellite capability, laser satellite capability, be able to communicate very efficiently from the lunar surface and ultimately from deeper space, from Mars. Advanced power generation. Can we utilize nuclear power on the moon and in free space? Obviously, solar power continues to be, but we need higher concentrations of power in order to really do anything in space, especially when you're talking about in-space manufacturing, in-space construction, larger and larger scale habitation. The capability to mine water and minerals on the moon, Mars, and asteroids. No small task. And perhaps there'll be a consortium of private entities that'll come together. They've got to close that loop, and government's going to still be a part of that. The ability to efficiently transport resources to desired locations throughout the cislunar environment. So that demand on that transportation on the transportation system is going to increase exponentially over time as activities increase in the cislunar environment and beyond. Capabilities for in-space mining operations that will feed in-space mine manufacturing. So linked very closely to that is the notion of in-space manufacturing of goods and services that could, in part, be delivered to U.S. markets. To markets that are Earth-based. These are not insignificant endeavors, and of course, then large-scale habitats on the moon, Mars, and in free space. I know that Elon Musk said he's going to take us to Mars and do it all under his own capability, and maybe those who want to invest with him. But I think that the challenge here is a little bit larger and a little bit longer term. So these are the things that we're looking to finance. So when we begin to look at how we finance things, that we can see what the capabilities are in terms of how those large, how these kinds of activities can be financed. Of course, direct funding from the government has been done in the past, right? So that's where funding can come from. And obviously, we have some examples here of Lewis and Clark expedition, certainly the polar research, the Apollo program, the space station initiative, and the James Webb Space Telescope, and of course the Artemis program. These are very, especially when you talk about Artemis, and these very expensive initiatives that that government is paying for. And it has to do with national security. That kind of there will be additional resources, additional financial resources certainly would become available. But this model essentially is not sustainable for developing a true economy, which is really what we're striving for in cislunar. So where does the private sector come in? And these are just mechanisms whereby capital can flow into private investments, and most private companies, startups, and so forth are utilizing these mechanisms: debt capital, equity capital, private equity, venture capital, certainly direct donations of people who just feel like, gosh, this is a great cause, and they're not looking for a return on that investment. So, and most recently, a few years ago, we saw a lot of excitement around SPACs, or special purpose acquisition companies. My good friend Hoyt Davidson, I remember at the time specifically saying, well, maybe we don't need to worry about the commercial space anymore, because these SPACs are going to be a great way to generate capital. And most of us anyone who's been following this knows that the story is anything but, and the SPACs have not quite achieved the kind of levels that we want, and have become less of a favorable mechanism for raising capital. So we continue to work in this area. The strongest point is the strongest way is some sort of a partnership between public and private entities, right? So I spoke about how NASA is working with private companies. They're putting in some money. The COTS program was hugely successful, and that enabled to us to see the Falcon 9 emerge from that, and the government paid a fraction of what that capability is. So, however, how do we take kind of what we've started and get a little more sophisticated about that? And so I want to look historically now at other kinds of public-private partnerships, and I'm using this term very generically, so in case folks are saying, well, wait a minute, when we say PPP, we mean something specific. I'm using it very generically, where the government is stepping in to help to stimulate certain economic developments in certain areas. So we like to talk about the Transcontinental Railroad, where the government was very much directly involved in issuing bonds to enable the Transcontinental Railroad to take place. This was is always a great example because, you know, in many parts of the United States where the railroad went through, there people said there was nothing there. Of course, there was a lot of things there. There was nothing there, but what the investors understood was that there was that there was potential for the settlement. And so once you had the railroad there, then you were able to the settlements and cities and towns were able to spring up all along the routes of the railroads as they developed and ultimately crisscrossed the United States. The Tennessee Valley Authority is another great example how the government helped to set up the Tennessee Valley Authority to electrify rural Tennessee. And rural electrification around the United States was very big in the early part of the 20th century. This kind of direct government involvement helped to really stimulate this. And of course, the Tennessee Valley Authority is still going strong. It doesn't require any. It's self-sustaining, and continues to provide a very valuable service to the community. Other things like a little more interesting, and this goes international with the U.S. International Development Bank. This is something Hoyt Davidson has sort of looked at and said, well, you know, this bank helps to directly invest in companies, U.S. companies internationally. Could we change and modify this program such that it could be focused on private space investment? So he has an excellent paper on Outer Space Private Investment Authority, and this could be a means by which we could leverage an authorized bank to pump money into and to fund large scale programs. And then there's something called a little known authority of the U.S. Trade Representative is to Fast Track Trade Promotion Authority. And this allows the USTR to work to negotiate deals across bilateral, multilateral, across countries to stimulate particular specific sectors. And it's a very useful tool when we're trying to engage with countries to develop resources, whether it's energy or mining or agriculture. And so it's been a very useful tool. And there is potential here if we had what we would call a space trade agreement. This is actually an idea that has been developed by Robert Brumley, who has a bit of history at the Department of Commerce, has been hugely instrumental in helping to shape commercial space early on. And I see, I'm not sure how much time, could I get a time check? I know I started late.
I'd say we probably could go about another 10 minutes, perhaps.
Okay, I'll try to wrap up, and let me not drill too deep. Inmarsat, this was a government initiative to set up Inmarsat. That's now an independent organization. I love this idea of CHIPS, the CHIPS Act, which this is I forget the exact dollar amount, but the CHIPS Act is investing tens of billions of dollars into improving the U.S. chip market. Right, we just heard about that. Big news recently. And this is where the government is saying that chips, semiconductors is a strategically important capability for the U.S. to have, right? So we could similarly say that our ability to develop the commercial space is a strategically important a dimension of the strength of the U.S. economy, and therefore would warrant the kind of significant direct investment. So just something that we're thinking about. Other government incentives, and these are applied in various ways: loan debt guarantees, low interest loans, tax incentives, potentially a zero tax for zero G as a common recommendation. Certainly cash subsidies and flow through shares. This is in Canada. I won't explain that, but it's in the report. I'm going to post the report, by the way, for folks. I'm sorry, I meant to do that at the top, but let me walk through a couple of models that we've been looking at. So we're looking at this idea of a dedicated neobank to support the economic development of space. So this is the idea that we actually create a bank, and its focus is on raising money and investing in space projects. So the idea is if you're a believer in space, you now have a bank that you could put your money into. It's FDA. Let me see. I think it's FDIC insured. It can then the bank will then over time invest their capital into space ventures, and thereby you can help to grow the space economy. And there are upsides and downsides to all of this, and we can get into that conversation. A space commodities exchange. This is can we commodify certain things in space? You could certainly right now you potentially could do launch. Over time you could look at the acquisition of, say, volatiles in space as being a commodity and so forth, and this exchange could expand over time. And again, it's another way of putting capital into the markets so that that capital could then be used for further development. I do like Tim Crispin's plan for creating a space public-private advanced commercial enterprise, or SPAC, and this is whereby you have a quasi-governmental agency or an independent corporation, if you will, that is established by an act of Congress that oversees all of the development of commercial and human development, the commercial development of space, and helps to utilize many of the mechanisms that I've already talked about in various ways to help us to drive that forward. I think there's a lot of positive to be said about that. There's an interesting proposal for a lunar cooperative, and this is now looking at more narrowly looking at the lunar surface if we can look at the lunar surface as a community, you can create a lunar cooperative almost like a port authority, right? That would be able to provide the tenants with basic and fundamental resources and things that they need, like power and access to water and to food and certain basic things that this cooperative could then supply. And then, of course, people who wanted entities that wanted to participate then would become partners in that, would pay certain fees for certain services and so forth. It's got a lot of promise. It would take a lot of upfront investment, and I think that's where government can play a big role in an idea like this. If we pull it back a little bit, I also like the ULA, United Launch Alliance, and Tory Bruno has been promoting this for a few years now, the Strategic Propellant Reserve, and they're basically saying that if the United States could create a propellant reserve in orbit, and this picture here is what this propellant depot could look like, and the scheme here is essentially that the U.S. could create this depot and then guarantee that anybody who can bring propellant to this facility that we would guarantee to pay them for that propellant. And they're surmising that a $15 to $26 billion investment can help to achieve this $1 trillion economy by 2050. So, just to conclude, there are a range of ways that we can approach financing, right? If you've gotten anything from this conversation, it is that we have not decided on a particular track as such. I'm going to stop sharing now. And we have not decided that on a particular track. We are continuing this effort. We have a working group that's starting, and we're going to kind of going back to square one to continue this conversation. In the end, we may come up with a specific recommendation on how to move forward. But this conversation needs to be ongoing. So I think with that, I'll conclude.
No, this has been really good and really helpful, Steve. Thank you so much. We have a few more minutes, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions that are coming in, and then we're going to move on to our next part of Conversations for the Future today. Steve, a question coming in a country so polarized where our space strategy gets reset every 2 to 4 years due to partisan struggles. What can we do to provide community to the space strategy in America? Without such continuity, how can we give the market any faith in the stability of space as an industry? And can we dislodge the private space industry from the legacy government structures which have traditionally slowed it down?
Yeah, I think that's a question in the form of like, this is what we have to do, right? So we do need to have a government and a population that is more invested or understands the potential of space and what it means to the future of our country and the future of the strength of our economy. And the second half of that is moving the private sector away from the government requiring of as you say legacy companies. The challenge here is that there's that government is really so important in this transition period. That's the challenge here. As much as we would like to say that the private sector can lead this, in many ways they are leading it. There's a role the government plays in terms of certainly in terms of funding, but also in terms of the regulatory parameters, establishing the rules of the road, because it's the government that's going to essentially or ultimately create that sense of security, that there's we'll be able to that people will be comfortable, especially when it comes to human spaceflight, right? That's very important, that people feel safe, they feel secure, that there's reliability, that they know what they're getting into. So government is going to continue to play I think we'll always have a role in this, and I think it's a little naive to think that that the private sector on its own was going to be able to open space. It's important though to strike that balance, and we do want a situation where government investment in space ultimately becomes a very small fraction of the overall space economy, right? So we see that now in the commercial satellite, in the communication satellite industry, right? So there's a massive commercial aspect of the communication satellite, and we kind of need to get there when it comes to other types of, certainly the cislunar economy and so forth. So, and I think the government is understanding that, especially the U.S. government. It's been very positive to see that with the new administration. It's a very pro-commercial orientation. It's sort of one of the positive holdovers or things that have transitioned nicely from the previous administration. So, I think there's a lot of room to continue to work that way. And I think globally, we're also seeing that recognition as well. So.
Well, thank you so much. That was great. Steve Wolf joining us. If you are still thinking of your questions, don't worry, just put them in the chat, or Steve, if you can leave your information in the chat so anybody can reach out to you, social media, LinkedIn, email. As always, the best part about the conversations we have today is continuing the conversations moving forward, especially sometimes if you might have that one question you want more of a one-on-one interaction with. So Steve Wolf, Beyond It, thank you so much for joining us today here on Foundation for the Future.
Thank you. I'll put those some stuff in the chat. Hopefully everyone's still sticking around. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
So, because we have a great next hour ahead of us, and I'm actually going to turn my moderating duties over to the fantastic Coffee on the Moon with the Galaxis girl, Anara Tabir. I think I said your last name right, and if I didn't, then please let me know because I don't want to make a mistake. But Anara,
that was close enough.
well, Anara is a science communicator and aerospace connector. She is the president of the Multi-Planet Society and the executive director of Gaze in Space. And her work focuses on bridging the public and the industry to secure our future. Coffee on the Moon, in case you're not familiar with it. If you love coffee, great. If you love space conversation, even better. It's part of our new monthly segment. And if you missed part 1 last month, you can find the recording of the live stream on any of Foundation for the Future social media channels. Now, in the monthly segment, Anara will be holding interviews to discuss our monthly topic and how through this topic of reference, we can work together to be a multiplanetary society. So, Anara, welcome. Also, a very happy birthday as she's staying with us today, which we're so excited. And she's got 2 fantastic guests, Irina and Marcia, and I will let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I can't think of a better way to spend my birthday than having a coffee with a bunch of spacers. So hopefully next year we can do this on the actual moon, but for now, we've got the right company at least. And I'm really excited about today's guests. We have Irina Litchfield and Marcia Sadler. Marcia, am I saying that right? Is it Marcia or Marcia? I think you're muted.
You're on mute, Marcia. And it's Marcia.
Thank you.
Marcia.
Thank you. Perfect, Rebecca. Perfect. Great to see your great big smile.
Marcia, thank you so much. So Irina is a principal at SVS, Premier Minority-Led VS, focused on space and dual-use technology. With a deep-rooted passion for exploring new frontiers, Irina brings a wealth of knowledge and insights to the forefront of the global innovation stage. With expertise in financial strategy, crypto industry, new space, Irina has held executive positions across private, public, and nonprofit organizations. Marcia Sadler, she is a connector who lives at the intersection between finance and entertainment. For the past 30 years, she has served individuals and creative enterprises and created opportunities between investors, technology, and most recently, private space initiatives. Welcome both of you to Coffee on the Moon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I got my cup. It's the little baby Yoda, so I figured it qualifies.
It does, absolutely. So Irina, I want to start with you. Talk to me about how you got into the space side of things. Finance is, I think, probably one of the most pivotal aspects we need to cover in space these days for sure, as we become more of a real industry. What was it that led you to this intersection of finance and space?
Well, I really appreciate that you pointed out that finance is what we really, really need. And Rick Tomlinson invited me to join Space Fund as an advisor, and he thought that I have a great insight that the industry would benefit, and I graciously accepted. Though I said I'm not an astronaut, and I can't beat a rocket. You know, I'm not a scientist and I'm not an astronaut. And he said, okay, we have astronauts and we have scientists. What we need is finance people, innovations people. We need leaders to come in and join and help us build the fabric of the, you know, of what can be space industry, commercial space industry can be. So I was honored, I accepted it. And as I like to say, that just basically sucked me into the whirlpool of all the goodness that space industry is. First thing I identified, it wasn't an asset class. So I was like, okay, there's definitely a lot of work to do here.
Absolutely. And I think one of the issues is that space has been such a government sector for so long that now that we're taking those training wheels off and we're really becoming a real private industry, there's a lot of missing skill sets. So one of the struggles has been, how do we get people who have these amazing skill sets like yourself from those traditional industries to prioritize space? Was there a hurdle for you coming in, looking at space in the sense of there's not a real sense of exit, there is nothing but risk, and there's not really a customer base? Did that kind of seem daunting to you coming in?
No, that really didn't concern me, because what I looked at is at the fact that it is an established industry. And it's a very mature industry that does already have a lot of money. And so that opportunity for commercialization, and especially when I came in, new space industry has already existed for a little bit of a time. And so Space Fund, for example, was first VC fund for early stage startups. So to me, all the matrix for what is needed to establish it as as an asset class, as well as also identifying that there's a need for application of innovations. There's a lot of innovations that are just really not applied because in old space, it's a little bit different, and the transitioning into new space have taken over a decade. And so by the time mature companies implement all of the sideline innovations, the software platforms, not the rockets to get us there, but the kind of things that we can build maybe in cloud or applying different technology, and then that commercialization, right? The space is not an asset class. It doesn't have all that requires to go from the beginning to liquidity event. And so when I came in, I was blessed because that Space Fund allowed for me to see that matrix that, okay, there's that establishment of asset classes happening. And I just got so inspired by that. I was not worried. I see it as an opportunity. I don't know how long it will take, but the time doesn't scare me because I built Bitcoin exchange in 2013. So I understand things take a long time, and I'm comfortable with that.
It sounds like you've been on the cusp of these new innovative industries for quite a while. I mean, crypto, the public still doesn't really understand that or grasp it. We still see a lot of issues with it. What do you see as the next big steps that we need to make to get the public on board with space? Not necessarily the companies, but the public itself.
Yeah, I think outreach and communication and doing exactly what we are doing and really making sure that we are being kind of exclusive. I think one of the big things that we can see is that the non-dilutive funding that comes in, the decision makers in the non-dilutive, an unbelievable amount of non-dilutive funding, maybe need to include leaders from the outside of already established organization to help them understand things that might not be in their purview, because they surely are amazing at what they are doing, but we have to almost mold two worlds, commercial world and government world, together, and that's the intention. So I think that's the one thing that would make a big difference, because different experts from what I call the other side, though we're all on the same side. There's no other side. We're going toward the same objective, which is save America and make sure that we have the freedom and we secure opportunities. There's no doubt we're all on the same mission. So, but I think that would be the most important thing, is actually see leaders from other industries of finance. And I'm not talking about big bankers. I'm talking about those that understand innovation, that are on a leading edge, and then allow them to actually come in and be able to voice what are the blind spots that are they seeing. So then the decision makers that are in charge of that non-dilutive funding hopefully can hear and then make proper adjustments. And what I call the floodgates of all the opportunities will open then.
Absolutely. Now, Marcia, I'd love to bring you in at this point. You come from finance and entertainment. Talk to me about your journey now into space, because it's relatively new that you've transitioned into the space side of things. Is that correct?
super duper new. Couldn't be more new. I feel completely yeah, it's interesting. I remember Rebecca knows because you know, we've been hanging out a little bit here everywhere I go. She's there. But yeah, I have the fire. I caught the bug. And the thing is, I agree with everything that Irina said, 100%. And I think it's just we're all like I don't know if y'all guys know the Simon Sinek, you know who he is from London, who created the bell curve that, you know, the early adopters, and then, you know, we get to this position where, you know, it starts to get exponential. And with Chat GPT and AI and all these things, it's a perfect chaos to emerge out of. And I really think the simple solution for this is the public just needs to be to understand how far we've come and the connection that they can have with it. I think that is quite literally the missing link. And so, you know, I just saw the show that's coming out called Stars on Mars that I think Lance Armstrong's the first guy that's going to be on the show, and William Shatner's hosting. You know, whether they fail or they make it, it's irrelevant. They're calling analog now simulation, because when you use the word analog, everybody's like, huh? But I really think analog, you know, so the area that I live, and you're right, we're all on the same side, but we wear different hats. And the place that I am certain to want to be living in is that part that will help fund a lot of space is right here on Earth, meaning the stuff that happens here, the way you know, when is the NFT going to come out for these different things like Space Kind and you know, human, what is it? Human always space for human, no, human for space, right? Program.
Yeah,
For humanity.
The space program or space for humanity.
Yeah, this one
You
I gotta
think in
keep
space
going.
for humanity.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, you know, can you imagine if someone can actually buy into that? And the overview effect, I mean, that's you know, people are naming their companies after that are in space. But there's a real hunger. There is a real hunger for another way of looking at life. And so I'm thinking, what are these other ways that we can introduce space to them right here on Earth while we wait for the technology and wake people up to realize, like, God, this is so close, much closer than we thought. And it'll just snowball. That's just, you know, Irina's right. It will not be difficult. It's just this little, you know, part that we're kind of stuck in. And we need to move and keep moving forward with that. So entertainment, for me, immersive entertainment is a door opener, a complete door opener for space, because you know, I think I told you, Nara, was over at the SpaceWorks, I called Cyan Proctor to come, and she brought, you probably know Kyle from SpaceX. And, you know, nobody knew why we were in this meeting, kind of, and I didn't even know either. And they're like, and next thing you know, we're having lunch and we're freaking out of all the things that can be done as they incubate these startups. How do we introduce that to, you know, with art and entertainment and, whew, you know? But Cyan had a really great idea just for that company right there. She said, you know, rather than having, you know, necessarily, you know, it's great to have 3D and all these things to be printed and you know, as you incubate these small companies for space information, you know, for space products. She said, you know, the great part about it is the digital aspect of it. You can kind of build around it, see what it's like. And so, but now it just, imagine, that's great. It's all in your world, but imagine that out in public. I mean, it's kind of like an open source idea is what I'm thinking in terms of space and entertainment. I hope that makes sense.
Well, and I'm seeing a lot of like first attempts or first footsteps into the water, basically, from organizations and companies like, let's put booze in space. Let's send some shoes on the moon and do a marketing campaign. These kind of like more gimmick oriented things, which I think, you know, they have their place, but it's a sign that they're at least trying and trying to figure out how they can exist in that realm. You know, we had Mars One, and that was a huge fiasco, but the public was so engaged with this idea that we could mix entertainment and space in some big way. And I think we damaged our reputation as an industry with the public with that, you know, whole situation. But it showed us that people are really interested and they're willing to dream. And we have new organizations like Space Hero bringing on, you know, new show ideas, and now this new one. What will it take And what do you think the path forward is for the entertainment industry beyond the gimmicks? Like where are we going to hit that ground that we can really
Yeah.
engage with the public?
Geeks, find the space geeks in the entertainment world. You know, failures are not, you know, like as you probably follow from Elon, they're, you know, failures are just a moment to, you know, a way to learn, right? And take in the information. But space geeks, they're all over. They're hidden in all the, you know, different areas of entertainment. They've been there all along. And they're kind of shy about it because they're not really sure really how far we've come. You remember that meeting we had with the guy, George Joblove from the Academy of Motion Pictures and, you know, Sciences. The science part is the part that he leads, and he didn't know a quarter. He literally, I was writing him an email and I was like, man, that meeting was electrifying. I'm like, oh, I don't want to shock him with the word electrifying. You know, I toned it all down, and he writes me back, it was electrifying. So,
Nice.
you know, it is electrifying, right? And if you allow these people to know about more of what's happening and bring them on, I hate to say it, but I just really feel like an NFT or a crypto, a coin of some sort is just, it's just.
Yeah, so this is the thing about it, is that we have to be very careful with technology, and we have to understand what we are doing. And often the technology doesn't function how it appears or
Yeah.
what it should be, right? And so I do agree with you with eventually an interesting ways of applications for that could be useful in the space industry. But majority of people, they don't look at NFT. You know, who cares about who cares about
A
entertainment?
lot of people do, right?
Children and parents and kind of general population. And so that's really interesting thing we can do right now. You know, you can use the Midjourney, and you can draw a picture through GPT chat using your imagination, using your prompting. And then, you know, you can create worlds. One of the interesting things that I really love, I'm really excited to go do it. Midland is doing this. You basically go there, and Interflight Global is coordinating it all together. But basically, you go there on adventure and you tour. You know, you see facilities, and then like a helicopter comes and whatever, and it like picks you up and it takes you to the facility, and you go into Mars or Moon or whatever, and you leave there, you know, for like a couple weeks. And so like the experiential entertainment is so important, you know.
Yeah.
Kids want to see entertainment, adults want to see entertainment, and that immersive becoming so important. I don't know if you guys know, this is not related, but for basically like $50,000, you can go and be trained to be a spy. Like for $500,000, you get to like go through different like Matrix, you know, like you go through some kind of training. And so the point here is that people seek that, and you know, they want that. And as we mature and as we start going and having our space industry, right, that's when your digital art will become most important, because how do you create environment, you know? But we do have to be careful with NFTs and tokens, because it can be a gray line, and we can't have space industry work in gray areas. And unfortunately, until SEC, and it goes to finance again, just for different industry, until SEC makes clear decisions about what technology does, how is it, you know, how do we identify it, and we don't have to guess. We can't guess in space. We can't afford that. It's very expensive.
Yeah, I see your point, and that makes a lot of sense. So in the meantime, we can play around with the art in space, right?
Yeah.
And create like NFTs for those. I mean, but I agree with you. I understand. I think
there's a thing that CC is saying, that it might be that NFTs will be identified as securities. Until you know that something is not security and it can be labeled, you really don't want to mess with it, because why? Like, it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
And so And a lot of people, I come from the industry, but NFT can't, you have to work with experts. You have to know what you're doing. It can't, if it's trading on secondary listing and it has a value and how the pre-raise is, there's all these points. And one thing we can tell is that SEC is clearly looking at everything. Have they gotten to NFTs? Not yet. But I think they will come through and our regulations will be established because that's what the industry needs. I hope that it doesn't overreach, but let's go back to space because we're now in the SEC and the finance.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, but the fact that they're looking is great. And once again, eyes on anything like this is a good idea. So yeah, I just think, Inara, to your question here, I think we need to seek out those, those nerds, those space nerds, that have the bug already. And somehow we have to express the ability for them to kind of be creative in that area. So like what you said, the immersive entertainment, I really think is going to bridge that. That's just my message, my opinion on that.
Yeah, have you guys played these games right now? Basically, you turn on the TV and it's interactive. So you make a decision. And I think that's a really cool way because you can design and get people go through. Yeah. And I think I really appreciate what you're saying, Marisa, is that it really is once we put them into the immersive and it's easy, I mean, it's not easy. I don't know how to make movies. So it seems very complex, but what we're seeing is that, I mean, generative AI can create this now, and when I look at something generative AI does, and there's like an arm sticking out of an ear, whatever, I have forgiveness for it. But going through this innovative ways and providing the information that is useful, I think, is the key. It's not just for fun. They need to learn something because then they can apply it in the real world. And they don't need to know that they're learning something. It doesn't have to be, this is the training. It's just for fun, but the information that's placed in there is benefiting the viewers. I think that's where we can change the entertainment. Entertainment is not very positive programming, and we can change that with space.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you on that. Absolutely. And it incorporates the overview effect and all the things. Sorry, Inara, we're not letting you talk.
No, it's fine. I'm not here to talk. I'm here to listen to you. Both you have amazing views. So
sorry, I was going to say, with the overview effect, and the things that, Space Kind and the training and all those things, I feel like there will be an enormous appetite for those things as long as they learn about it, as they find out. So I just, there's just a lot of work to do. And you're right, it's not easy, but you know how it is when things go viral, right? Then everyone, it's like, looks so easy, but to get there, it gets, it is a little bit of a leap, but once it's caught, there's no stopping it. And then the rest of the work will come with the real work, which is to get on the moon and get, and to get to Mars and the actual real money that needs to go into that. About just let the public find out, where we're at. It's all over.
Well, I think one of the deficits that we have in America, and I've said this before, is the educational system. If we look at China, for instance, the average citizen in China is very invested in the idea of space, and the youth especially, they understand the importance of it. If you talk to Chinese youth, a lot of them want to go into the sciences. A lot of them want to be astronauts. And then you talk to American children, and it's like, I want to be an influencer. I want to be a social media model. So we have this deficit where spaces has not been embedded in the social fabric of the country. And we don't have the ability to change the educational system wholesale because it's so siloed. There's just no way to really update our current educational system from like factory worker to space entrepreneur, for instance. So we need something dynamic. I'm glad you mentioned gaming, Irina, because it's where I see the biggest possibility of embedding something useful in the sense of people are already there. The youth and people, between 14 and 35, I think is where the real target zone is. People are there spending their time, giving their preference. We can embed real training. And I think the Space Force is looking at this. But we could also embed an understanding of the importance of space. Have you dealt with this as far as in a structured way, Irina?
Space Force Association. I serve on Space Force Association. I co-pilot our Texas chapter, and so with Space Force Association, this is one of our objectives, is to really build the bridge into the education from K to 24. And what's been interesting, and I get really excited about it. One of the things that we're looking at is actually making Roblox world for space. And the demographic for Roblox are girls from, I believe it's like 11 to that 24-year-old, and it's women and it's girls that interact with Roblox a lot. And so it gives us opportunity to be able to build a whole world and for them to code in ideas and solutions. And it's all kind of can be an open source, right? Anybody can do it. And so Space Force Association is focusing on that and coming in as as kind of the force of saying it is fun to learn, and there's all these things. And how are you thinking about it? Also, synthesis. Space. I believe it was SpaceX that Elon made a school for his own employees' children or for his children, and then synthesis became a school. It is really great education, and it's so fun. Now they're actually using AI to hire a lifetime tutor that works with you. It's like only $800 for a lifetime subscription of having AI be working with you and building all of the kind of education around you. That's interactive. So it's all happening. It's all happening right now. It's just we're still not seeing it implemented in traditional schooling and traditional educations, and then mainstream. There's a lot of space. For example, in Russia, space, one of the most popular artists right now, his name is Shaman. He uses space almost in even if it's just a field of grass, eventually he plugs in space with the visuals, because the truth of the matter is that young people care about space. And I still consider myself a young person, so I care about space. And I see a lot of people in my industry, in my other industries, they actually invest in space. They just might not be active people, were they thinking about investing in space and all of that. And so it's happening. Education is happening, but it needs to be implemented in a traditional way to where Americans can see it through the kind of empowerment of our government, if you would. I would love so much to see Department of Education actually come in and say, we're going to be proactive in this effort to work together for, I don't know how it works with Department of Defense and NASA, and Department of Education, not a politician, but I do know that America needs it, and we need it for I'm going to say this, and this is not pretty, but it is a matter of national security. Implementation of innovations and the development of space is not about going to Mars. It's not about going and doing many things. It is later. First of all, it's a national security, and our freedom is a threat. It's not maybe one day. Things are very, very dynamic in the world right now, and space industry and innovations play a big role. So I feel like Department of Defense could come up and say, hey, we have an extra budget for this. Let's make sure that we do that. Let's make sure that we educate our children. What are we doing with the high schoolers? The high schoolers that are coming out right now, they could have some kind of courses for the space and innovation. Doesn't have to be space, just innovations that allow them to learn and comprehend it. So as they transitioning into universities, they can actually make choices instead of going and being, attorney. Nothing against attorneys, but you can GPT chat it. You know what you cannot GPT chat? To be a mechanic, to be an engineer, to be actually plumber. If you want to GPT chat how to plumb, simple pipeline, it will not give you answer. It's not programmed that way. So anyways, I'll stop there.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point. The poison is really embedded, or the cure is embedded in the poison, if you will. One of the problems I see, and it is absolutely a national defense strategy that we need going forward with the youth. One of the problems I see is that American education is very circuitous. So if you want to be an engineer, you have to take basket weaving and poetry and all these other courses. And we talk about a well-rounded education, which is great, but we need to target these courses that are going to be really vital going forward in the future. Our educational system cannot be de-siloed. There's just no time to really, affect all of these systems across the board. But that means that what we can offer is the alternative. We can set up analogs. And I love this new focus on analogs right now. If we were to set up analogs as makerspace hybrids for youth, over a summer course, we can create highly dense courses that will give children the edge in the sciences. So what happens is, if these kind of centers of STEM and space are set up in communities, parents will see that their kids have an economic advantage coming up. They'll start prioritizing this over the summers. And that way we create this natural preference for these augmented courses, and we supplement over summers. We can create scouting programs, working in cooperation with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Space Force Association, and I think in this way we can create these kind of like back-end educational systems to make up for what we can't alter. The good thing about that is we have full control, because these are outside of the traditional realms. We can build them from the ground up. So I'm really interested to see how we can do that. Marcia, in your role, I know you're working with Dr. Moraba Jah. I know that he's really focused on debris mitigation, but also in how he talks to the public and getting them excited. I see a lot of what he does similar to Jerry O'Neill, like getting the public really excited about it. What is it that made you want to come and work with him? What are you most excited about as far as engaging the public?
It was the same thing I keep talking about, like when you guys speak, or I hear Irina speak, I'm moved by it. To be honest, and I hope you guys don't take this wrong, I'm so out of the space, like I never knew anything about it, that when you speak, I feel, I don't know, less educated, if you will, right? You feel kind of like, I'm dumb, I'm not sure about all these things. I had no idea, I hadn't thought about this, or, all these good things. And so with Moraba, what attracted me to him, and I was the one that reached out to him, was I'm like, here's a guy who can actually cross over just by existing. Here he is, he's done. I don't know if a lot of people know this about him, and he's spoken about it publicly, but this guy ate garbage, literally out of the garbage cans at one point. So you got to imagine, where he was and where he is. So, there is a certain humanity to him that is so vital and so important and so necessary and so needed. Now, that's just in the way he looks and the way he is. On the other side of him is his mind is extremely engineer and scientific, and it's not like me, right? So sometimes when we communicate, he's like, I don't understand you. I'm like, I know, I don't know how to say this, so I get that from him as well, right? And I think what it is it's that's the reason I reached out to him. He's definitely that crossover figure. There are others, including you, Inara. But his mission is literally to do that, I didn't know that when I reached out to him. So at one point I said, I was meditating and then somehow connected with you, and I'm not sure if I'm in your movie or in your, or you're in mine, because, when you really have this strong will to get something like this done, the people appear. And so, we did some photo shoots, and I gave him a whole different kind of idea of what, what's possible for him. Literally possible things could be like walking in a fashion show. There's a stylist out of London who works for a magazine called Dazed Digital. And, he's comes from Sierra Leone, which is where Moraba's family's from. And he's like, became a huge stylist, and he's hooked up with a lot of, really big companies like LVMH. And I read this thing and it said all future fashion shows will be intergalactic. You know what? I mean, how does that happen? Right? I mean, so there is this like movement, and that there's help on the outside, we just have to, stitch this all together. And so I want to be clear about something though, when you guys speak, you're really speak from the inside, and I'm really an outsider, 100% an outsider. I'm thinking in terms of like Bailey Burns. What can we do with Bailey Burns, of Rubik's Cube girl, right? I think that she's so awesome. Her energy is so great. I'm like, God, what commercial should she be on? You know, what can we program around her? And so I contacted Matt Luber, by the way, Inara. And I said to Matt, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to manage. I mean, I manage finance for my clients, right? But I said, I don't think I want to manage clients. I want to manage projects. You know, I want to help the projects get out. They need more help than the people because, you know, because they have a life of their own, you know, Space Kind, for example, being one of them. I mean, how do we rally and get funding for that? Or it doesn't require much funding, to be honest with you. It just requires influencers, people who are out there, who get it, who understand it, and those geeks. So does that make sense?
How can we tell a long-term story, really? Because I think you're right in the project mindset, but those projects, really, it's the same thing going back to the fact that there is no space industry, that we have to have the groundwork laid. In marketing, it's a long-term story. You know, all these different pieces of marketing and different organizations marketing, they're all telling one big long story of connection with the public. How can we start telling that story in a way that makes sense, that doesn't just stop with one project? How can we interlace them so that what happens is you see it in finance, you see it in fashion, you see it in religion, in arts,
Absolutely.
and, you know, everywhere.
That's just it. It's not one project. I'm talking about many projects that will interconnect with each other, right? So, you know, in Moriba's case, he's interested in literally bringing he calls it traditional ecological knowledge, which has nothing really to do with space and everything to do with space, right? Because it touches on ancestral people who had a lot of knowledge, who followed the stars. I mean, it is a down-to-earth, homey way of connecting with people on Earth. Because you know what, guys? Most of the people don't want to go to the moon. I mean, a lot of people don't, right? But they are fascinated. They look at the world like they would like you to go to the moon, Inara. They have they would like you to go to Mars. They want to communicate from here. They want to communicate from here. But your idea, all right, I have something to share with you. I don't know. Just recently, I was at the Analogs astronaut conference, and I came up. I thought to myself, I don't know if I came up or I saw someone talk about analog life, right? And I thought, oh my God, that's it. Analog life. It's got to be everywhere, right? And I'm like, oh, let me just go and, go get analoglife.com. And I thought, I don't know if I want .com anyway. I just wanted to, register it. Guess what? Analog Life, if you want to buy analoglife.com, is $5,000. What does that tell you? It tells you that it's out there. People are thinking about it. Now I ended up registering something that was more dear to me, which was analoglife.earth, because if you really know what an analog idea is, it's really on Earth and it's a simulation and it's going to go there, blah blah blah. So I thought that was more explanatory for what it is, and I wasn't thinking commercial really, but yeah, this is right there. I think we're right there. I could see it right through the glass.
Absolutely. And I think there's also a model that I'm looking at right now that I'm really interested in. Irina, I'd love to get your opinion on this. And it's like the mining town model, if you will, the company town model. There are people that are buying up real estate around spaceports, and the idea of building space cities and building out analogs within those space cities. I would love to see this matured, where what happens is those of us who want to go to space do, those of us who need to go to space do, but then what happens is there are direct benefits to these cities on Earth where space culture is being built out. So, it's kind of like if your family were into mining, you'd be in Miami, Arizona, mining copper, and your whole life would revolve around it. Irina, are you seeing kind of financial purchase or priority going in to this idea of building these cities?
It's happening a lot around Midland, movement starting to happen. And then on the coast of right around SpaceX in Texas as well, you start seeing different villages pumping, land that was nothing. Nobody wanted it. Even for free, they didn't want it. It is now thriving, it's benefiting, and the ideas are being built. I think that it is clear that we love we love humans. We love going places and things. And so kind of a type of a theme parks and experiences for a whole family to be able to do it from being dropped with a helicopter, more expensive experience, to kind of going through somewhere where little kids could go to is important. And it is happening now, just it's very hard to put funding on that. So what's happening is people are buying land. So for the most part, opportunities around are already bought, so, and then the prices have already went to where, the opportunity has left the train.
Well, I could see, once we can make the business case for such startups or settlements, if you will, we could take them to places like Portugal.
Yeah.
One of the targets.
Midland. So Midland is doing this, right? So a lot of spaceports, and this is the thesis, is that basically you have, right now we have spaceports, and spaceports, they do what? They launch rockets, right? And so there's not much visiting there's not many experiences, but Midland is approaching it, and they saying spaceport is like an airport, because they also are an airport. They're spaceport and airport. Basically their approach is to say, let's build a whole ecosystem around it, and not just space companies, but what are these different service providers? What are the different experiences? How does it work? Since I think that really it was driven by the fact that Spaceport America and Spaceport Midland, they got the FAA license to do commercial hypersonic testing, because that opens a corridor, and it's a quick ride. Not yet, but it's going to be pretty cheap. And so family comes and they're like, go fast, let's go fast. People love American roller coasters, basically that's what I hear that is. And so seeing those different experiences, and then biohacking facilities, then there are people that are coming in and saying, well, what I call experience providers, right? So experience providers now, a lot of talks are happening in experience providers communities to say, what can we do for space industry? What kind of communities we can have? And experience providers are your sound meditation people, your meditation, your breathing meditation, your journey to your masculinity, your journey to femininity, all of those aspects of the experiences, different experiences that some people seek. That also interestingly combines it all together in the same, because we all are different and we all want different things. And it does sound fun to go for a week somewhere and be like, okay, I'll drop from helicopter and I'll do like 2 days stuffing out, that's all. and I'll feel like a hero. And then I'm going to go and I just want to kind of integrate it all. And maybe I'll go through like a sound meditating session with the entheogenic experience to like do the light and stimulate my, do biohacking, psychohacking, and then make sure that also I go with my kids to the things so they get inspired by the ideas, and then we can buy stuff, and we can bring stuff home. It is all happening now. I know that Midland is working toward it. I know other spaceports are as well. It's just taken a little bit of time. And I think the best thing we can do is that we can go out there and say, Marissa, for example, maybe you could go to spaceports and say, hey guys, what are you doing? What experiences you're providing? What kind of art you have? What story are you telling that's going to want me to come back? Because Disney we love theme parks. And so it's not a theme park, but it's that immersive. And then as people visit spaceports, they learn, they find out opportunity. Maybe there's a job posting for something to where you need the marketing professional, and somebody's like, I don't have to go to space to be in space industry.
Yeah, exactly.
I can use my PR or my administration skills or my art graphic design on my ability to write music, or I can paint. So I can have plenty of jobs just working and creating art, because in an immersive experiences, it always changes, it always adapts. You have to move things around. I think that's where it is happening now. We just
Yeah.
need to expedite it. And to
Yeah.
expedite it, we are the ones that have to go and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel 100% what you're saying. I can literally feel it, and you're right. We're right there. It's going to happen. It's happening. And I was thinking, got into a dinner, people don't understand, a lot of, like, certain people don't understand this. And you get a little bit of pushback, like, what's analog life, and like, why? And and the other issue that we get here, you probably have heard a lot, is this whole thing of space is actually hurting the earth, right? So those are the narratives that we have an opportunity. I say we, like I'm all in it, but I'm hoping to be.
Oh, you can't leave now. We got you.
You got me in there. Okay. That we have the chance to explain that narrative, to people. And then once you get that on board, when you get those people, it's all downhill after that.
Well, I think part of that is removing that dichotomy of Earth versus space. This idea that space is somehow someplace else, and making people realize that we're living in it. We're in space at all times, and it affects us. And more than just the whole Velcro argument, that our satellites are in space and those regulate everything in our lives, and space weather affects us constantly. But I think from the environmental aspect, one of the messaging pieces that I'm working on is this idea that you're not really the height of environmentalist if you don't have a space strategy. Like, space is really where the biggest solutions for our ecosystem live, and where we can take the most pressure off the system is through space. And so once we have that, we can leverage this to really, like, tip the balance of, here are some of the things that are a problem that may damage, but here are all the things that are benefiting. And when you do that, it just becomes a really clear case of space is the way forward. Irina, going back to the idea of the city model. Sorry, go ahead.
We see many companies, actually, space companies' engines innovating and creating fuel. There are several companies that are doing it better way, that need to fly, right? The need for power, the need for energy is really pushing forward the innovation. I mean, there's like a fuel from regenerative farming. It's for small rocket, but it's there. They're already doing tests. And so we are adapting into this. And also another thing is, we rely on space industry in a daily basis very, very heavily. And people, I think, could underestimate how hard it would be without space. And because we're in that, I want to go back to that national security, because we are in a situation to where the way we live our lives, it can be seriously threatened if we do not take seriously the innovation and democratization of space, and building the technologies, building the innovations. One of my concerns is that we are seeing this push from environmental kind of a structure saying, well, it's trying to prevent things. But I think that you're right, and we need to get manufacturing out. We need to do, but the train has gone. We can't not do space. It's our critical infrastructure that supports the freedom of our lives. And unless we want to speak Chinese and live in a communist party under the Chinese rule, I don't think that this is an option,
Really well said, Inara. That last line right there, this perfection, that was exactly it. Really well.
Well, we can't underplay. There's no way to really overemphasize the threat that China poses to us. Like, we need to be very clear with the public that cislunar space is the ultimate high ground. I mean, if they take cislunar space before us, it's not just about speaking Chinese. They will close the door on everyone that's not part of the Communist Party in China. They will dominate that space. Every government has their issues. Every paradigm has their issues. But if America takes cislunar space, lots of people get to play the game. If China does, the game is over. And we really can't, we have to get that messaging out to the public in a big way and help them understand the gravity of that, and then it's right now. I think the biggest danger is the devil making people think he doesn't exist. And the public doesn't realize that we're in the 5 to 10 year gap right now of when that space is taken by someone. So it needs to be us. And if we're going to do that, we have to have a national strategy. The public has to be on board. So I love when I see space, getting into fashion, beauty, entertainment, music, movies, everywhere. I'm seeing it more and more, although I'm looking for it, obviously. I go out scouting, and I'm looking for people like Marcia and Irina that are bringing all these other knowledge bases to space. But space has to be so many places that you can't avoid it. And finally, people are like, okay, I'm in. We have to kind of wear them down a little bit.
Yeah.
100%. I'm with you on that.
Also, guys, I wanted to point out is that space is very inclusive industry. And I really want the world and Americans to understand that US space industry is inclusive, and it is amazing. You can just go wherever you are, to whatever meetup, to whatever conference that's happening, and you can have the support. And there's not really kind of like, oh no, you're from marketing, go away. In fact, it's probably going to be like, oh no, you don't have experience, that's okay, come on in. We need people. It's worth it. So it is, as you come into the new reality and you learn new things, you're not expected to know everything. And in fact, life would be extremely boring if there were no challenges at the point to where it's like, oh, I didn't know it, but now I know, and how wonderful it is. And so the reason I'm saying it, Marcia, is because you said that you felt that you didn't know. That's a good thing. And you know what? Next year, this time, we're going to be talking about it. You're going to be like, I'm saying all the same things, because in the end of the day, it is fresh perspective that we need. And we want to make sure that in the space industry, when you come into space industry, you feel that you bring something very special.
And thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yes. And we need you. We need your fresh perspective. We need your ideas. And the fact that you are new is a good thing.
How about this? How crazy is it? This is it's a small group. I'm going to say this. There is no guarantee whatsoever of this, but because of I got more involved with this one particular person who happens to know, who's close with, not very close, but knows pretty well Michael Jackson's IP lawyer, and so they've been talking about the fact that, hey, Michael Jackson invented the moonwalk. I'm just going to stop there. So
okay, I'm excited. We are broadcasting live, so you probably don't want to go too far with it. But yeah, I'm excited.
Sorry. But that's all I'm going to say. Hey, everybody knows Michael Jackson invented the moonwalk.
I can't wait to see what happens here. There's some great.
I don't know, Inara. I'm just saying.
Rebecca, you had a comment.
Yeah.
I do. Irina and Marcia, both of you, the points you're touching on are so important. I have 2 degrees from Harvard University in social science, and my specialty here in the space domain is how do we keep people from fighting each other? And the experience industry that you were touching on, Irina, and the entertainment industry that you were touching on, Marcia, is so important. As a social scientist, it's one of the first things that I will work to implement is that social infrastructure that we need. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, you know that they have entertainment all day long. There's always an activity. Do you know why? Because if you let people just sit around, within 48 hours, they will turn on each other and they will start arguing with each other, and they'll destroy their environment and they'll kill each other. And so all of the entertainment and all of the experiences, they're vital to human mental health, to decompressing, to maintaining happiness. And they're also a distraction from the bickering and from how human wills just always clash with each other. It's a mechanism for peace. And I am completely on board with what you've said. And I believe there's a huge entertainment industry for space. We just need to spread the message, because that's one of the most important parts of our social infrastructure that we will need to implement.
I 100% with you on Rebecca. That to me on a personal level, that's what excites me. I'd like to, see the emotional intelligence. I mean, Jerry Springer died, God bless his soul, right? But God, making money from things like that, it didn't really set us forward. But I think everything happens for a reason, so I'm not here to judge or anything, because I'm really getting tired of judging and thinking and being around people who judge and all of that. So yeah, Rebecca, that's one of the reasons I adore you, is because you always keep things on the positive, and I want to hang out with people like that. So thank you.
Absolutely. So our time is up for the day, but I'd love to just leave with maybe some bits of advice from both of you, Marcia and Irina. If there's anybody out there watching this, either live or recorded, and they're trying to figure out what they can do to get involved with space, what advice would you give them to get that journey started?
Space Kind probably would be a good start.
Space Kind training, yeah, fantastic. By Loretta Whiteside, spacekind.org, fantastic organization. Definitely helps get on the inside and figure out where things are, and
come from a good place. Come from a good place, right? Start off, get it going right. Let's start right. We have a chance to fix a lot of problems here, so let's do it.
Absolutely. And Irina,
Could you repeat your question?
Yeah. So if there's anyone out there that wants to get involved in space and doesn't really understand how they can play that part, what advice would you give them to get started on that journey?
I think go to Meetup, or virtual or in person, or attend an event. And there are plenty of nonprofit organizations that are highly driven to support the ecosystem. Talk to people, and even if you don't know what it is, it's okay. You will find out. That's part of the journey, and opportunities and the need. It's not just the work, it's also opportunities to open businesses. It's to learn, it's to build community and really understand also. I mean, I think that it's important to join space community just to understand what's going on and how much of your life actually things that you think are trivial, that you don't pay attention to, relies on the space infrastructure. And I think that's what you do. You go, and then if you have kids, ask them if they want to go to a space camp. Go to space camp, or go to a space museum. Take a picture with an astronaut, because they're touring all over the place. But go out there, learn, expand your world. And you never know, one time going to a meetup, or one time doing joining a Zoom group, if you don't want to do in person, it can change your life and open up opportunities. I know that's what happened for me. One meeting, the reason I do the work that I do here right now in this industry, and everything I do and motivates me, started with taking one meeting with Rick Tomlinson and frankly being confused. What am I going to do in space? But walking away from there, I felt so much power. I felt so much excitement, and it was so wonderful to be included. And space industry is inclusive. If you'll only go to space meetup,
I love it. That's awesome.
Go to space meetup.
Yeah.
Go to a conference. There's plenty of free conferences. There's all kinds of resources and opportunities for you. And space people are just awesome people.
That's a great way to slowly go to space. That's perfect. Great line.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if there's anything we can do to support your work, please put your links in the chat here, where people can reach you and reach out for questions or support the organizations you're working with. It's been great having everyone here today. You can find us on all the socials as Foundation for the Future, and check out our website at f4f.space. Rebecca, did you want to say anything before we part?
Oh, we're happy to see you all today. Those who are listening live on LinkedIn, and those who are catching this later on YouTube, and those who are here in this room with us. Thank you to our speakers. We value your expertise immensely, and join us next week at the same time, 10 a.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, the 23rd of May. We will be following up again with space money and space finance. So we'll see you then.
All right, bye guys.